Diana Ross was born in 1944 in Detroit, Michigan. She was the second of 6 children. Her mother was a school teacher, and her father was in the Army. Her mother actually wanted to name her Diane instead of Diana, but an error on her birth certificate resulted in her name being Diana.
I love birth certificate errors. It's just so funny.
She actually went by Diane for the early part of her career, and some of her family and friends still call her Diane instead of Diana. For a while, when her mother got tuberculosis, they moved to Alabama until her mother recovered enough for them to move back to Detroit. For a while, Smokey Robinson was their neighbor, which kind of helps with the connection point. On her 14th birthday, the family moved to a housing project settlement, and Diana attended a magnet school where she took classes with the hopes of becoming a fashion designer.
Oh, love it.
You can probably see evidence of that.
Heck yeah.
In her dress. From a very early age, she showed an interest in music and singing. She started singing in the gospel choir of her Baptist church as a kid, and at age 15, she joined a vocal group with some neighborhood friends that they called the Primettes. They were the sister group of a male vocal group called the Primes that eventually became the Temptations.
Okay, that second part was cool.
Thanks to Paul Williams, who was the leader of the Primes and eventually the Temptations, they were introduced to a manager. After winning a talent competition in Ontario, they were invited to audition for Motown. One of the members left the group right before the audition, leaving Diana, Florence Ballard, and Mary Wilson as the members of the Primettes. Apparently, they got the audition because Diana approached Smokey, her childhood friend, and potential former boyfriend, depending on who you ask. Smokey agreed to get them the audition if he could use their guitarist for an upcoming tour. Diana thought that was a pretty fair trade. They got the audition, and Smokey got their guitarist named Marv Tarplin, who ended up playing with Smokey for the next 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That worked out well for him.
It worked out well for all of them. Barry Gordy heard their audition and was immediately struck by Diana's vocals. He said it stopped him in his tracks, and he went in to hear the rest of the audition. But he advised the girls to finish high school before coming back. They didn't really accept that answer and kept hanging around the studio, recording backing vocals for a few different recordings. The next year, in 1961, Barry gave in and signed them to a contract.
He lasted a whole year.
Yeah. Barry's one condition was that they change their name. Their manager approached Florence Ballard, the only member of the group at the studio at the time, with a list of potential names. She chose Supremes because it was the only name that didn't end with "et." Reportedly, the other members didn't love the name at first.
Really?
In 1963, the group scored their first minor hit with a song called "When the Love Light Starts Shining Through His Eyes."
That's a long title.
Yeah, it is. It reached number 23 on the charts, and soon after, Barry made Diana the lead singer. Before that, Florence was basically the lead singer of the group. Not long after that, the Supremes started what would be a long stand in the charts and scored their first number 1 hit, "Where Did Our Love Go?" It was another song written by the incredible writing partnership of Holland Dozier Holland, who were the Motown staff writers. The song stayed at number 1 for 2 weeks and was the first of 5 straight Supreme songs to hit number 1, or to hit the charts.
Wow. Well, which
or number
one?
1. My script says Supreme songs to hit number. So I'm guessing 1, but I don't know. Between 1964 and May 1967, they had an unprecedented run in the charts with 10 number 1 songs. They were the first group to ever have 5 songs in a row hit number 1.
So there's the answer.
Yeah.
Number 1.
Where Did Our Love Go? Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop in the Name of Love, and Back in My Arms Again were their songs that all hit number 1 in a row.
I'm seeing a theme.
In 1967, things started to take a turn, as they often do.
I don't like where this is going.
Barry Gordy fired Florence Ballard from the group.
What?
And replaced her with a girl named Cindy Birdsong.
What?
He took Cindy from Patti LaBelle's group.
Why?
Florence expressed a little bit of dissatisfaction with the way the group was going. She didn't like Motown's influence, claiming the touring and Barry making Diana the star was pushing the group apart. Struggling to cope with Motown's demands and her own depression, she started to abuse alcohol, and that led to arguments within the group.
Oh, Florence,
her alcoholism also led to her missing recording sessions and performances. She received a settlement from Motown releasing her contract, tried to have an unsuccessful solo career, and then lost a lawsuit against Motown for royalties. In 1970, she applied for welfare and entered rehab. She started to have a bit of a comeback in 1975, but she suffered a cardiac arrest due to a blood clot and passed away in 1976 at the age of 32. Meanwhile, Barry recognized the star he had in Diana Ross and changed the band's name to Diana Ross and the Supremes. That
Just kicking
change,
old Florence out and then just being
Yeah.
like, that's fine.
that change made it easier for Barry to charge a larger fee for a solo artist and their backing band instead of charging a fee for a group. I'm not really sure how that all worked, but apparently it did somehow. I don't know. Diana was pushed way too hard during this period, and as she claims in her autobiography, the stress of this period drove her to suffer from anorexia. She collapsed on stage during one show and had to be
Yikes.
carried off. By 1968, Barry wanted Diana to go solo, so she started performing by herself and even started a few recording sessions to release a solo album. Barry planned for her to break from the group by the end of the year.
It just makes me sad.
It probably should.
Because it's just like, what about the rest of the Supremes, you know? What about them? They matter. They made it a success.
Yeah. I don't think anyone has ever accused Berry Gordy of, like, having a heart or morals. In 1968, the Supremes, pretty much after Diana had already left, landed their last ever #1 with Someday We'll Be Together. Diana performed with the Supremes for the last time in 1970. All told, they were the most successful vocal group in history with 12 #1s. At their peak, their popularity rivaled only the Beatles. Their work paved the way for the future of R&B and inspired countless young performers. Later in 1970, Motown released her first solo album, simply titled Diana Ross. This album immediately kept her incredible string of successes with her first solo #1, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. It was her version of a song that was already a smash hit for Marvin Gaye, and it earned her a Grammy for Best Female Vocal Performance.
I didn't know that.
Started more than a decade of dominance from Diana Ross. She released another 2 albums pretty quickly, but they were eclipsed by the soundtrack to her first movie. In 1972, Berry Gordy was all in on films and wanted to showcase his stars, so he had Diana Ross star in a movie called Lady Sings the Blues, which was loosely based on Billie Holiday. The movie was a massive success, and Diana won a Golden Globe and was nominated for an Academy Award. Throughout the rest of the 70s, she continued to release a string of hit songs and albums. She released a duet album with Marvin Gaye that was immensely popular because, of course...
I feel like I want to listen to that.
Yeah, exactly. When she toured Japan, she was the first entertainer in history to be invited to the Imperial Palace for a personal meeting with the Empress.
What?
Yeah, random little tidbit I decided to throw in there. In 1974, she became the first African-American woman to co-host the Academy Awards.
Get it!
In 1976, Diana proved that she could cater to the explosion of disco with her 4th solo #1, Love Hangover. Her next 2 albums sold modestly well, but nothing astronomical, especially for her standards. She starred in another movie called Mahogany that also did not do well, but for some reason, none of this really hurt her star power at all. She was still a Diana Ross. In 1977, she starred as Dorothy in the film version of The Wiz. The film flopped. It was
so sad.
It was, at the time, the most expensive musical film ever made, and it was a $10 million loss for Motown.
God.
That movie basically ended Diana's film career and was a massive setback for production of all-black casted movies for a while. In 1980, she released her most popular album of all time, called Diana. It became her first solo platinum album and earned her a 9th Grammy nomination. Also in 1980, she released a duet with Lionel Richie called Endless Love. Endless Love would be her 6th and final solo #1, which it's a duet, but, solo. Endless Love also happened to be one of her last singles for Motown. In 1980, after almost 20 years with Motown, she started negotiations to leave it. She received $250,000 from Motown as severance. RCA offered her a $20 million 7-year contract that gave her complete control over her recordings. Diana asked Berry if he could match that offer, and Berry said it was impossible, so she signed what, at the time, was the largest music contract in history.
Wow.
Her first RCA album, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, was almost entirely self-produced and earned her another platinum album.
Nice.
A few more top 10 singles, and a couple of Grammy nominations. Diana rode a wave of hits into the mid-1980s before she saw her popularity start to wane. At the time, most of her releases were either re-releases or re-recordings of earlier songs, and were heavily disco-inspired. As the 80s drew to a close, disco wasn't exactly the hit thing anymore. In 1988, she returned to Motown. She heard about Berry's plans to sell the label and urged him not to, but Berry did anyway. The new owners begged Diana to come back and offered her shares in the label as part owner, which she accepted. Through the 90s and 2000s, Diana positioned herself as a legacy artist and didn't focus too much on new releases or tours. She also appeared in a few different television shows. Diana reunited with the other surviving Supremes founder, Mary Wilson, for the first time in 1973 for Florence Ballard's funeral. In 1983, she reunited again with Mary and Florence's replacement for a Motown 25-year special, during which Diana apparently made great efforts to keep Mary out of the spotlight.
Okay.
Yeah. In 2000, she tried to negotiate for a Supremes tour with all living former members, but Mary Wilson and Cynthia Birdsong refused the offer. So Diana toured with 2 newer Supremes members. After pretty low attendance at the first few shows, the tour was canceled. Recently, Diana has continued to enjoy her status as a music legend. She is set to release her 25th studio album in September of 2021.
What?
Which, might have already happened. I don't know. Features her first original material since 1999.
Ooh.
Diana Ross's list of people she influenced is almost too much to name. It has long been said, though she denies it, that she discovered the Jackson 5, but it's no doubt that she influenced them. Madonna and Beyoncé both have stated her as a major influence. Both as lead singer of the Supremes and as a solo artist, she earned 18 #1 singles. 2 of her songs are listed in the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. Billboard named her the
Which
female
ones?
entertainer of the century due to having more songs hit the chart than any other female singer.
Of the century.
She had 70 songs hit the charts.
Holy cow.
Yeah. She has won several Grammys, a Tony, and a Golden Globe. Her legacy in the music industry is immense. And that's Diana Ross.